So I recently happened upon a story about a church that was about to get a new pastor. And the church council wrote down the list of qualities that he wanted in the new pastor, gave it to the district superintendent, and waited for the pastor to show up that resembled his values in every way. What they got, from preaching style to conversation style to the fact that she was a woman, she was the polar opposite of the council chair. And the council chair criticized her at every turn and kept looking for the smallest infraction. Finally, he decided to invite her to his boat, moored on a nearby river, and spend more time with her so they could iron out their differences. So she agreed, and they met at the waterfront bridge and set off. After going a few dozen yards from shore, the pastor said she was cold and wanted to get her jacket from the car. The chairperson said, "I can take us back to shore." But the clergywoman said, "Don't bother." And she stepped out of the boat and walked on the water to the shore. And as she walked on the water away from the boat and the chairman, he muttered under his breath, "I can't believe they sent a pastor who couldn't swim." There is a truth that no matter how amazing a person might be, if they don't think like us or look like us, we're suspicious. Creation, in its entirety, is rife with diversity, and yet fear has driven us to try in whatever ways we can to make us all look alike and think alike and act alike. And when we privilege dominant voices and when we limit perspectives and others' points of view, we lose the beauty of diversity as a gift from God. And we forego the pleasure of celebrating all that God has created. And diversity, something that is so cherished by God and through periods of our history is also cherished in community, has these days, I'm afraid, become more like a polarity of extremes. I mean, people have made choices that have created a really interesting dynamic. Research has discovered that we choose, for instance, to move into neighborhoods with people like us, who have the same bumper stickers that we do. And we often choose a feedback loop of hearing our own thoughts of what is right or wrong, reflected in our choices of, say, watching Fox News or MSNBC, or reading the Wall Street Journal or the New Yorker, reading daily Bible reflections by John Piper or by Richard Rohr, or by listening to NPR or talk radio. Did you know that there are even certain religious search websites like Joogle that returns only Orthodox Jewish results? Or Seek Find that returns only conservative Christian results? Not kidding. There's stuff like that out there. And if we're not with people who reflect ourselves, most of the time it's because we choose not to be. We freeze out that coworker at work, avoid certain family dinners, or excuse ourselves whenever that friend hosts our game nights. There are some that even want to split our church into a progressive church and a traditionalist church over our beliefs about the inclusion of LGBTQI persons, seeking to turn the United Methodist Church into the untied Methodist Church. Now, the reality, good or bad, is that we increasingly live, experience, and surround ourselves with media, people, and places that reinforce our beliefs rather than challenge them. So it's no wonder that maybe there are some people in the world who are working really hard to celebrate diversity, to push boundaries that keep us separate, to sing and create songs that purport to create experiences that bring us together. A song that has been featured in the Jamaica Tourist Board television advertisements since 1994, including a 2007 version that promoted Branson's Virgin Airways flights to Jamaica, also appeared in the film Marley and Me, where, when the song was heard on the radio in that movie, inspired the character to name his dog Marley. The song was also recorded by Antonio Banderas for the 2010 animated film Shrek Forever After. That song is One Love, One Heart, sung by Bob Marley and the Wailers. It was actually chosen as the best music of Jamaica over the last 50 years, and joined with the words from People Get Ready, was named Song of the Millennium by the World Health Organization. And it starts like this: one love, one heart, let's get together and feel all right. Sound familiar now? No reggae fans, but anyway, it goes, hear the children crying, saying, give thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will feel all right. Saying, let's get together and feel all right. Well, how can we, as the Church of Jesus Christ, hear the stories and cries of children all around the world clamoring for a voice, for recognition, for acceptance for who they are, bring us all together rather than continuing the separation that is far too common? Now, the story of the Tower of Babel may seem an odd choice for a discussion about diversity, but I'm going to challenge us to go with it. Because the Tower of Babel story comes at the end of what we call the primeval history, the first 11 chapters in the book of Genesis, which tells the story of humanity from its start to the point where God calls a specific people, Abraham and his family. The call of Abraham and his family stands as God's response to humanity's degradation and distance from God. So in this context, we can read the Tower story from at least two perspectives. First, that the confusion of language and the spread of humanity over all the earth is seen as a punishment for yet another instance of rebellion and pride, something very common in the primeval history to date. Now, most of us grew up with that perspective, and it is one way, trip over the potatoes, to read that story, excuse me. But a second possibility exists. The stories in Genesis, you see, are not only full of accounts of human rebellion, but they speak also of what God does when humanity rebels. Now, we don't often pay much attention to the genealogies in those chapters. Anyone else confess to sort of skimming them? Yeah, when they come up. But they really do have a tale to tell of this constant expansion of humankind and its diversity in its way of living, occupation and skills, and also of their diversity through family descent, with each one having its own land, language, family, and nation. And it's really significant to me that this story of Babel comes straight after Genesis 10, and if you don't believe me on this one, you can go home and read it, with its mention of differing lands and languages. So one could see that the diversity and spread of humankind was, according to the genealogies and the way that humans developed, something that actually God desired. So then the sin of Babel is not so much the pride in building a tower, but in resisting God's intention for them and seeing the tower as a means to achieve a unity and a oneness of purpose that is becoming like God as a means to achieve that. God's eventual scattering of the people, confusion of their language, may have been simply a way of achieving the divine purpose, even against human resistance. Now, from our vantage point as 21st century people, we see the differences of language throughout the world having developed over a very long period, as differing groups establish themselves in different parts on the earth. And yet, while the story of Babel sees the dispersal of languages in an entirely different way, one which we might regard as mythic in its content, it remains profoundly true in a different and insightful way, because it speaks not just of the human propensity for unity through language, but also through knowledge and economics, law, education, housing, pretty much anything you can name. And we often resist the diversity that is part of who we are as creatures of the one who made us all. So we seek, through unifying systems and programs, to raise our heads above the heavens and become like God, controlling everyone around us. Yet the irony is that we're really not like God in that regard, who creates a rich diversity of life and calls us to live in that context. But the story can also be a reminder to us that such things as diversity of place, difference in language, can accentuate division, strangeness, suspicion, even hostility. So we usually find in various places around the world one group who's trying to reach the higher and dominant place where it will reign supreme over others, where it can declare victory and say, "We've won. We are the best. We are right next to God." And that's reflected in the lyrics of the song One Heart. Let them all pass all their dirty remarks. There's really one question I'd love to ask. Is there a place for the hopeless sinner who has hurt all mankind just to save his own beliefs? Now, John Wesley, as we know, the founder of Methodism, had this sermon called A Caution Against Bigotry. And he warned against having, quote, too strong an attachment to or fondness for our own party, opinion, church, and religion. John urged his followers to recognize the faithful witness of others, even when they do not agree on all matters that seem essential to us. There is a place for everyone in the world. My brothers and sisters, you are a unique individual created for this time and this place, for this church, in this community. No one else has your unique energy, your creativity, your way of thinking. And that applies not only to you, but to every living thing on the face of this earth. And you have the responsibility to focus, to get in touch with your gifts so that we can take this incredible message of diversity and love and acceptance to the world in which we find ourselves. So we all say, yes, for glorious diversity. Cool. But then I would say, all right, so what? Where do we go from that yes? Now, I don't often preach stuff from the Book of Discipline, which is our book of doctrine. But at the risk of breaking that convention, I invite us to hear these words from a section in that book entitled Our Theological Task, which is really great reading for all of you who are interested in United Methodism. And it says, United Methodists, as a diverse people, continue to strive for consensus in understanding the gospel. In our diversity, we are held together by a shared inheritance and a common desire to participate in the creative and redemptive activity of God. In the name of Jesus Christ, we are called to work within our diversity while exercising patience and forbearance with one another. Such patience stems neither from indifference toward truth nor from an indulgent tolerance of error, but from an awareness that we know only in part, and that none of us is able to search the mysteries of God except by the Spirit of God. That's our book. That is an amazing, amazing paragraph. Friends, we are given the best way through our disagreements to recognize our own humility as we break the silence about such disagreements with conversation, approaching each and every person with the awareness that we only know a part of their struggle, and we know only in part what God's possibilities are, and we know only in part what our role might be. And then our guiding light through the diversity of human experience becomes patience and humility. Just imagine what a little humility and patience might do for our work, our family, our friends, any of our relationships. With the polarization of our country, our church, the acrimony of opposing sides growing further and further apart, what better witness to the world could United Methodism give than how to hold a unity in diversity and how to love one another, even in disagreement? So perhaps our lasting contribution isn't in buildings or doctrines, but showing how to live together in common mission with diverse approaches to that mission. Wouldn't that be an enviable and attainable contribution that our church can make to an increasingly polarized society? Now, we may not like the way others think or act, but we're not called to necessarily like each other. Jesus says we're called to love each other. And people who love each other talk to each other. So get to know your pewmate. Get to know people in your church. Invite people you don't know out to lunch or over to dinner. Join a small group or class with people you don't normally study with. And beyond our church, with family and friends and coworkers and acquaintances, just become that listening person who brings humility and patience and a celebration of diversity to a world that is thin on it. And then we can say, with the lyrics of the song, one love. Well, what about that one heart? Well, let's get together and feel all right. As it was in the beginning, so shall it be in the end, all right. Give thanks and praise to the Lord, and it will feel all right. Let's get together and feel all right. And maybe then we'll become the disciples who truly transform the world, not by our own powerful arguments or right opinions, but by the grace of God, known through Jesus Christ, and getting together in the glorious diversity of the world that God has created. Glory be to God. And that feels all right. Amen.